John writes in his Gospel in chapter 15 and verse 1, he records these words of Jesus. This is what it says. It says, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it may be even more fruitful." So Jesus is making the comment that the whole idea of the vine is that it produces fruit. And he likens us to the branches on that vine. Let me carry on reading. He says, "You are already clean," or "you are already pruned." That word can be interpreted the same way. "Because of the word I have spoken to you." And the word that Jesus speaks to us is the word of truth. Of course, in this world where there's all sorts of stuff that is known as fake news and all the rest of it, it's good to know that there is truth, and the truth is found in Jesus. Jesus says, "Remain in me, and I will remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me." So Jesus is probably using the concept of a grapevine as he is speaking. And with a grapevine, of course, the bottom part is the roots that are out of sight. Nobody sees the roots, but they are the part that takes the nutrients and the moisture and then transmit that up through the main vine and then out through the branches and eventually into the grapes, into the final fruit of the vine. And so it's like Jesus is the one that keeps us grounded. He is the root stock from which we grow. And he likens us to the branches. Let me read these words. He says, "I am the vine and you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not remain in me, he is like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire and burnt. If you remain in me and my word remains in you, ask whatever you wish and it will be given you. This is my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples." So we show ourselves to be disciples of Jesus when we bear fruit, and not just a little bit of fruit, much fruit. Now let me back up a little bit. So the vine, as it grows up, the fruit or the production of the vine is the branches. So what Jesus produced is the branches, which is us. So we are the branches, we are the disciples. Jesus produced disciples, and then in turn the disciples produce fruit. And so on the grapevine, the main stem doesn't produce grapes. The main stem produces branches. The branches then produce grapes. Jesus is the main stem. He's the one that is rooted in his Father's love. He's the one that's full of grace and mercy. He's the one that's full of truth. He's the one that gives hope. He's the one that gives purpose and meaning. And all those attributes then flow from him into us, into our lives. And we're the branches that come out from that stem. So we are the produce, or the fruit, if you like, of Jesus' ministry. And then in turn, because we are the branches, we produce fruit. So on a grapevine, of course, the fruit that the branches produce is the grapes. And the grapes are different from the branches. The grapes in turn are used by people. You can eat them raw, just as they are, and they're juicy. But also in Jesus' day and also today, grapes are what wine is made out of. And of course, wine is there to make you feel good. That's the whole idea about drinking wine, is that it brings joy to the soul. Just don't have too much of it. Another attribute of wine, the Roman soldiers would use it as something that they could pour on wounds, because of the alcoholic content would help to kill the bugs or any infection, or prevent infection to a limited degree. Of course, we have a lot better stuff nowadays, but back in those days, that's what there was. So it has a healing purpose as well. So the picture of wine is it's something that brings joy. It's something that makes you feel good, and it's also something that produces healing. And so part of the fruit of our ministry should be that which makes people feel good and brings about healing. He says the Father cuts off every branch that bears no fruit. So basically, if all this effort's going into a branch and all it's growing is leaves and there's no fruit coming from it, then that's just a waste of effort and a waste of time. And so that branch gets cut off. And that means that the energy and the sap from the tree, if you like, from the vine, can go into those branches which are producing fruit. And to me, that's a little challenge into my life, and it should be a little challenge into your life, as to what is producing fruit. And maybe we need to look at the fruit. And of course, as we look in the Bible, in Galatians chapter 5, verse 22, it says this. It says the fruit of the Spirit. And the fruit of the Spirit is the character of Jesus. It's the character of Christ. Christ has gone to be with his Father. He sent his Holy Spirit to come and be part of our lives. And so his Holy Spirit brings that character of Christ into our life. And that character of Christ is this. It is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith or faithfulness, meekness, and self-control. In Ephesians, it sort of sums it up in these words. It says goodness, righteousness, and truth. These are fruit of the Spirit of God. So these are things that should be being produced out of our life, and any area of our life that is not producing this fruit needs to be cut off, because it's not doing any good. It is detrimental. It's using energy. It's using sap, that life-giving sap that flows through the vine is going into a branch which isn't producing anything. And so he says, chop that off so that it goes into a branch which is producing something. And then Jesus said to his disciples, he said these words. He says, you are already clean. In other words, you are already pruned. You are like grapevine that has already been pruned, so you are all ready to produce good fruit. All the dead stuff's been removed because of my word, says Jesus. Because of his logos, his spoken word, his words of life. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. His words bring that life-giving sap into our lives. It's completely about the fruit. I wonder if we looked at every aspect of our life and see what is being produced there. Is that fruitful? Not just character, but in the things that we do, and the things that we engage with, and the things that we spend our time in, and the things that we associate with. Is it producing fruit? And if not, maybe those things need to be pruned off. Jesus goes one step further, because he speaks about the branches that aren't bearing fruit being cut off, but he also says those that are fruitful will be pruned. And the thing that I've noticed about my grapevine is that after it's done its fruit-bearing activity for the year, I need to get in there and I need to snip it all back again. But otherwise, next year, there's a lot of energy just going into growing branches off branches. That might sound all well and good, but it doesn't produce the same amount of fruit. What we want to do is grow clusters of grapes. We want to grow good fruit off the branches, not just more branches off branch. And so there's a pruning. There's a trimming back, even of those things that we think is fruitful, is like pruning it back so that it might be more fruitful. So that life-giving flow goes only into the things which are producing good fruit. The good character of God coming through. Those things as a witness of Christ. See, it's all about belonging to the vine which is Jesus. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourself to be my disciples. In other words, if we don't bear much fruit, we show that we're not his disciples. If you read that the other way around, the way we prove we are Jesus' disciples is we do as he has asked us to do, and we produce fruit from our lives, fruit of our character, fruit from what we are doing, the production of our energy, of our time, of our interests. We are called to be fruitful. And I like that little thought of Jesus used the allegory of the vine, because the vine produces grapes. And the gospel is good news. It's there to make people feel good. It's not there. I suppose you can produce from grapes. I suppose you can produce vinegar too, and you don't want to drink vinegar because it's sour. We're called to be like the wine, not like the vinegar. The good news makes people feel good because it gives hope and it gives purpose. So I want to leave you with this little challenge today. How fruitful are you? How fruitful am I? I put some pictures of my back garden up as you've been listening to this, and as you can see, the grapevine hasn't been pruned yet. That's a job still waiting to be done. But also there's pictures of the hedge that has been pruned, and hopefully it'll be fruitful one day in the future, and it will grow a lot of thicker branches and twigs and leaves and whatnot, and give us a bit more privacy again. It looks a bit bare at the moment. There's a picture of a tree that I've pruned. My wife wouldn't call it pruning. And behind that is the great pile of all the bits of the tree that were pruned off. And they're a bit like that branch that Jesus says when it's pruned off, it lies on the ground and it withers. And that's what's happened to those. They've laid on the ground and wither. I can't burn them up because it would probably consume my neighbour's place as well, and they wouldn't be too happy with that. But the concept is there. And so I'm going to finish this with a picture of the chainsaw and a tree, and maybe it's time to prune that one back too. Have a think, not about your back garden, but about your life. What could be pruned out of that? And what is maybe working for you, but maybe it was last year's fruit, and it's time that old wood was pruned back so it could produce good fruit for this new season, because we're in a new season, and that's a real challenge. We haven't been this way before. None of us that are living today have been in a situation that we find ourselves in at the moment. For us, maybe it's a time in your life to be being pruned a little bit, so that eventually that good fruit will come forth. So let's just close this session today with a word of prayer. Father, I just pray for each one that is watching this video today, that you would encourage them, that you would strengthen them. Lord, that they would know your closeness and nearness. And Lord, even if they're feeling in their lives that they're being pruned back a bit, and maybe there's some stuff they're going, oh no, I really wanted that, and it's like it's being cut off. Father, let them know that you only do that because you love us. You do it that we might be even more fruitful. So Lord, in faith I say thank you for the season of fruitfulness that is coming. Let your work, your pruning work be done in our lives.